Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're excited to have you, and we are excited to explore the Lifesaving Society standards and how they could enhance your aquatic facilities, whether it's one, whether it's a bunch. Before we begin, although I'm fairly sure that we all know our webinar etiquette this far into our 2020s, but if you can keep your microphones muted throughout the presentation, just to ensure we don't have any background feedback. We encourage you to use either the Q&A feature or the chat box for any questions you may have. Those that come in during the presentation, I will mark in order and we will address it during our Q&A period. If you do experience any technical difficulties, do let me know. I can try and address it, or some of our background members can also try and help out as well. The session is being recorded and the recording will be shared on our website. And if you're not familiar, just to navigate over to the Safety Management tab at the top and then pressing resources over on the right. But let's introduce our speakers today. I don't want to take away too much of their time. There are two experts who continue to make waves in the world of aquatics. First up, we have Brian Connors, who's the current Director of Parks and Recreation at the City of Woodstock. Brian has extensive experience in aquatics and recreational sectors, holding leadership positions at York University, the City of Mississauga, City of Burlington. He also is the past president of the Lifesaving Society Ontario branch and Drowning Prevention Research Centre in Canada. His career contributions to drowning prevention and safety are significant and have served on the Ministry of Health's Public Spa Committee, among other key roles. Joining Brian is Sean Duffy, an aquatics facilities and safety professional from Ottawa with over 14 years of experience. Sean is currently the manager of facilities planning and logistics at the University of Ottawa, and he holds an honors bachelor's degree in human kinetics and is completing his master's degree in public administration. As current vice president of management training at the Lifesaving Society Ontario branch and an outgoing member of the National Safety Standards Commission, Sean has trained hundreds of lifeguards and continues to advocate for drowning prevention through various initiatives. Together, Brian and Sean will dive into the development of these Lifesaving Society standards and share how to stay above water when it comes to integrating them into the operation of your aquatic facilities. Without further ado, please welcome Brian and Sean.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Nico. I'll start and then I'll hand off to Brian. So our session today, we're looking at setting the bar, navigating and implementing Lifesaving Society standards. So the first question when we were putting this together is, what is a standard? And so, you know, when in school or in courses, often we look to our dictionaries for definitions. So maybe we will look at this here. According to the Merriam-Webster English Dictionary, there's several definitions of standard. Standard is defined as both a noun and an adjective. And there's a few that I want to point to here that are relevant for the Lifesaving Society. So the first is a conspicuous object carried at the top of a pole and used to mark a rallying point, especially in battle, or to serve as an emblem. So something that brings people together. This is what we use as a symbol. The other is we see here, item 3, something established by authority, custom, or general consent as a model or criterion. So it's something as well set up and established by authority as a rule for the measure of quantity, weight, extent, value, or quality. And then item 6, a structure built for or serving as a base or support. So when we think of the Lifesaving Society standards, they are something that bring people together, that provide the point of truth, often for operators in the industry, as well as a resource for government when developing regulations and legislation. Often our standards have authority and indicate to people what is the best practice that should be followed. And often they are a foundation from which operators build their policies and procedures, and where governments, as I said, build regulations and legislation. So if we look into more detail, what is a standard according to the Lifesaving Society? The Lifesaving Society is recognized as a leader in developing standards for activities in, on, and around the water. And through its National Safety Standards Commission, the Society sets national aquatic environment standards and clarifies existing provincial and territorial regulations. Locally in Ontario, the Ontario Standards Committee takes a formalized method of developing aquatic position statements and standards, and these contribute to improved levels of safety in Ontario's public swimming areas. Position statements and standards form the basis of future legislation. So, for example, if we look at a current campaign underway by the Lifesaving Society, the Society has released information from the public education realm on its position statement on the wearing of life jackets for boaters, and that position is being communicated to help people provide their opinion, and hopefully will form the basis of new legislation with Transport Canada. So the Society clearly articulates its position on various issues, and this is helpful to governments, to operators, and of course, the Society standards are built on research and collaboration locally, provincially, nationally, and internationally with agencies, affiliates, and stakeholders. So we rely on our community in order to develop important standards that are helpful for operators. Let's talk a little bit about the history of the Society's standards. I think many of you on the call might be familiar with our standards journals. In talking with Michael Shane earlier this week, we know that the Society has been developing standards since its foundation in 1908. First, as a builder of regulation with government, and that's where some of our existing standards live. For example, in Ontario, in the Ontario Public Pools Regulation 565. The standards are found often in the guides to regulations to help operators understand the government regulations, so often where there are gray areas. And now you'll see, as we expand and share some of our resources today, the standards help address issues brought forward by operators, by affiliates, to help clarify positions and ensure that we enhance safety in aquatic facilities. Standards are an opportunity, as I said, to enhance safety and prevent drowning in aquatic facility operations. And so with that goal, the Lifesaving Society started developing safety standards. We had the first standards journal in 2001, the second standards journal in 2004, and then the third standards journal in 2010. And then since then, the standards have been found, as we said, in our guides and other documents that have been published, as well as in various topical resources that are available on the website. And we're going to show you where you can find those today. It'll be important to note that there is national standards developed by the National Safety Standards Commission, which I'll touch on and Brian will go into in more detail. And then as well in Ontario, we have local or provincial standards that are applicable to Ontario. So you'll note your previous safety standards journals often had summaries of inquests and positions on issues that are not addressed in regulation or protocol. So things like breaks from direct supervision, change in lifeguard health status, and many of these standards are now found on the Society's website. So who develops Lifesaving Society safety standards? Well, often these are volunteers and staff from various branches of the Lifesaving Society. Here you'll see a photo of members of the National Safety Standards Commission who are meeting in this case in Toronto to work on national safety standards. They attend monthly meetings. They work to review and update the Society standards, and Brian will touch on that a little bit more later. The important thing to note is whether standards are being developed nationally or at a provincial branch, there's a multi-step process that involves stakeholder consultation and approval by a management team. In this case, from a national perspective, the CEO of each branch must has an opportunity to weigh in and vote before standards are adopted. Here's an example of the process used to develop standards. So again, we have research and initial documents prepared, approval, comments, editing, review. There's a voting process at the Standards Commission, the management team, and the board of directors before standards are published. And the intent is to review these standards at least every 5 years and revise them if required. So the idea is here that we have a rigorous process to develop standards so that when standards are published, they have rigor and they're based on both various references, but also the review of subject matter experts and stakeholders to ensure they're valid before they're published. And hence why when you see standards that are published on the website that have, a particular date that may be in the past, you may have standards that are published in current, but a review process is underway to revise them and make them more up to date. And that may take several years. Who is consulted? So the Lifesaving Society consults experts within the Lifesaving Society, both on the staff side and volunteers when developing standards, as well as various industry stakeholders, which include affiliates, operators, and members of the community, government, and so on, so that we have appropriate input when putting forward these safety standards. Recently, a SurveyMonkey tool was developed so that input can be provided into the development of national safety standards. And so a group of stakeholders is consulted here in Ontario, and their feedback is used to help inform the validity and approval of safety standards at the national level. When are standards amended or refreshed? So the Lifesaving Society strives to review its standards every 5 years. And where appropriate, standards will be revised to ensure they remain relevant. So there might be changes in legislation, the environment or conditions might change. A new type of activity, like, for example, the use of mermaid tails in a swimming pool might become relevant. Changes in human rights legislation around breastfeeding or things like that might come into play, and that might result in the change or the need to change standards. There might be court cases from a diving accident or a particular topical issue that changes in the environment, the introduction of, for example, inflatable water parks. So as the environment changes, the society will adapt its standards to determine whether a new standard is required, whether a review is needed, whether a standard has reached its end of life and needs to be retired. But regardless of the case, standards will follow a multi-step review process before that next step, that approval of a new standard or the retirement or adjustment of the standard is approved and put into place. Where do standards fit? What is a standard? How does it fit with the other rules in my environment as an operator? So the Lifesaving Society's provincial and national standards do not replace or supersede local, provincial, territorial, or federal legislation or regulations. They're an addition, they're a goal to work towards. They are considered the standard to which aquatic operators should work towards to enhance safety and prevent drowning. And that's always the goal or the focus. The society provides a minimum standard and promotes a range of safe practice. So operators should always look to meet and exceed the society's standards, whether required by local regulations or not. And regulators should look to the society standards to develop an update, regulators do look to the society standards to develop and update legislation and regulations. And courts and coroner's inquests will look to the society standards as the expected community standard in the environment, often where regulations are lacking. So here are some examples of provincial standards. In Ontario, we have an aquatic facility pool fouling standard. This was recently updated in January 2024 and is available on the Lifesaving Society's website. This standard keeps in mind research from the CDC and from the pool operator community to provide recommendations to operators on how to deal with pool fouling in their aquatic environment, and what pieces from this standard should be built into local facility policies and procedures. We also have the Ontario Waterfront Safety Standards from April 2019. So this is where in Ontario, waterfronts are unregulated with the exception of certain specific environments like recreational camps. Your typical municipal or provincial beach or waterfront will not have provincial regulations that say that they have to be operated a certain way like we do with pools. And so the Lifesaving Society provides the Ontario Waterfront Safety Standards to provide guidance to operators and an expected minimum standard for their operating environment. And in the Ontario Guide to Public Pools regulation, this guide includes the society standards to comment on the regulation and help operators understand how to apply the regulation in their facilities based on the society's research and recommendations. Where do I find a copy of the standards? So I've put 2 web links up here. We'll share these later on in the presentation and give you a chance to look at this in more detail. But national standards are found on the Lifesaving Society's national website, lifesaving.ca. And there are standards, general standards, swimming pool, waterfront, and some guidance related to COVID-19 as well. And provincially in Ontario, we have our safety standards on the lifesavingsociety.com website under the safety management tab. And the series, you'll see that a series of new standards have been published as of 2024 or updated as of 2024 and are found on the website. Now, I know many of you are interested in lifeguard safety supervision and the creation of supervision zones. So I'll just quickly point here that the Lifesaving Society has a national safety standard on safety supervision zones, which Brian will go into in more detail later. And I'll also note that provincially, we have a series of different standards that are relevant for operators in this regard. Breaks from direct supervision to ensure that lifeguards are adequately resting when they're lifeguarding. A vision standard to ensure that the lifeguards have the appropriate visual acuity to provide scanning in that environment. And then a within call standard, which ensures that facilities always have someone available to respond to a lifeguard to assist them in an emergency. And so these are available on our website as well. The Lifesaving Society promotes the creation of scanning and positioning charts to assist the lifeguards in understanding what zones they are responsible for. Here are some examples of scanning and positioning charts that some operators have put in place. And you'll see the use of colors and shaded lines are identify where intensive scanning zones are found, where zones overlap, and that's to ensure that all points of the pool, including the pool bottom, can be seen by a lifeguard and that there are no gaps. And this can be a useful tool to help train staff, but also to ensure that it's very clear to everyone what are the scanning zones and which lifeguard is responsible for them. So the Society does recommend that operators have scanning and positioning charts readily available in their lifeguard office that are changed based on bather load and features in play, and that this is a useful tool for lifeguards and for operators. And this is something we'll go into a little bit more later. I also want to share some of the commonly used references to build the Society safety standards. So obviously, we often look back to our own literature, like the Alert Manual, Canadian Life-Saving Manual, Canadian First Aid Manual, and our various policies, guidelines, and standards. We also look to the CDC, ILCOR, and the AHA for guidance, for research from the Canadian Drowning Prevention Research Centre, such as the drowning report that's released every year, to provincial guidelines and regulations from the Ministry of Health, Labour, et cetera, reports from coroner's inquests and investigations so that we can learn from how preventable deaths occurred and what can be improved to prevent them. And as well, we look to the international community, such as the International Lifesaving Federation, ILS, the United States Lifesaving Association, Pool and Hot Tub Alliance, and of course, the Model Aquatic Health Code, which is a document that shows where multiple stakeholders come together to identify what should be featured in pool regulations around the country. So research intensive, and the goal here is to provide a standard, a point of truth to assist operators in ensuring safe aquatic facilities. And I'll turn it over now to Brian, who will go into this in more detail. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Sean. I'm just going to share my screen in a moment. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So I hope everyone can see that. This is just my title slide, but
I'll stop you there. We can't see it still.
Okay. Let's see. Not it.
We saw your screen momentarily.
Do. Hmm. Let's see if I can.
Maybe while Brian's setting that up, any comments in the chat from people?
Not that I'm seeing right now. I had a question myself, but I want to hold off at the end to see if potentially Brian answers it for me. But if it is going to take a little while, I was just curious, are there any roadblocks or any factors to consider for someone from out of province potentially using Ontario standards, or vice versa for any other provinces that may implement their own on a provincial level and pulling it into use into another province?
I think that the Ontario safety standards consider Ontario's environment when they're being created, so in the legislative landscape. So often they are specific to Ontario, but that doesn't mean that an operator couldn't look to this as best practice and see, take elements from it and use it to apply in Alberta or British Columbia, for example. So you could look to Ontario standards to assist you, but I would also encourage you to look at your local provincial branch or territorial branch and see if there's resources there that might be more relevant and assist you in your environment. So we'd always encourage people to reach out to their local branch for guidance.
Got it. Okay. It looks like, Brian, your screen's up.
Well, that's good.
You throw it on
Okay.
slideshow. Floor's
There we
yours.
go. Technical difficulties for the old guy. So, this is my title screen. I've got a nice picture of Buddy, the lifeguard dog, there for you guys to look at. Hopefully, make you a little bit happy, because the first thing I have to talk about a little bit is governance. So, if you get too bored, just look at Buddy's happy face, and it'll be over soon. So the National Safety Standards Commission is part of National Lifesaving Society. And just quickly to talk about the governance practice that the Lifesaving Society is under, we have a federated model, which means the national branch works to support the provincial branches. It's not a centralized model where the provincial branches work for the centralized model. This is important with standard setting, because we have to deal with every province and territory and branch to make sure that the standards are the minimum standards are met and agreed to, but also there are provinces where their standards are different. So we have to work within that and work within our best practices to deal with that. So you will see at sometimes where national and provincial standards are using different topics, or the provincial standard, there is a standard where there's not a standard nationally in some areas. So that's just one of the main differences between the national and provincial standards. Standards in Ontario are quite fortunate in that they have robust health regulations, building codes, fire codes, where some provinces don't have those. And they simply rely on the Lifesaving Society national standards as their standards. So that's the difference with the models. So we'll just move on. So first off, the goal of National Safety Standard Commission is to develop and research 10 research-based standards annually. We tried to select what the commissions look at based on industry and stakeholder needs, as well as existing evidence. The National Safety Standards Commission's reason for being is to provide benchmark guidelines for aquatic facility operators. These are minimum standards to enhance safety, prevent drowning and aquatic related injuries. Some jurisdictions have legislative minimums, such as Ontario. The national commissions are particularly relevant to those that don't. The other piece to standards, both provincial and national, is that if there is a catastrophic event or an inquest or investigation is required and they seek expertise, they coroners generally or almost exclusively now use the Lifesaving Society, and the Lifesaving Society will look back on what the published standards are. So I always think that, it's best to make sure, as operators of aquatic facilities, we are meeting those minimum standards, just to make sure that if there is inquests and that, we're covered. So that's some of the important reasons for operators to make sure they understand and meet these standards. The National Safety Standard Commission, it's currently made up of experts from many different provinces, as well as the DND, which is the Department of the Defense. So there's 13 members currently looking into the standards from a national perspective. As Sean showed in his earlier slides, this is the process for developing national safety standards. I won't go into it too much. It is a long and formal process that looks at both research, it gets peer reviewed, and also operators' input is important, because there's no point in having a standard if no one's going to follow it. So it's looked at from multiple different levels, and at any point, if the standard kind of gets stuck or doesn't meet up to snuff, then it'll go back. So we have several standards in queue right now. So at the top of this page is the website for the national standards. There are 3 different areas you can go to on the national site to look for the national standards. This is the general standards. You can see things like lifeguard certifications, do not resuscitate, and signage standards there, and they're all dated. After that, you're looking at, there's a section for swimming pools, which have, areas on light levels, pool operation training standards, bather to lifeguard ratios, and swimming pool basin cover colors, which are all on that site. And then we have a few waterfront standards that have been published. These are the current standards that are under review. So their time is up. They've passed the 5-year mark. So these standards get reevaluated to make sure that they don't need any updating, or if they do, if there's any other research on these standards to have changes made. And finally, the National Society is looking at the following standards that are going under development, which are waterfront safety standards, open pool swimming guidelines, residential pool safety, safety plan templates, the National Safety Audit Checklist and Process, indoor air quality, lifeguards working alone, and pool design guidelines. Specifically, I know we were asked to look at the aquatic safety standards when it comes to lifeguard positioning and zoning and rotations. So this is the national document for that. In particular, what it's asking operators to look at is to make sure that they're looking at their zones during different times of the day and during each season. And also consider placements of different activities that could go on in the pool, like climbing walls or swinging ropes, those type of things. And that it should be looked at and posted for the lifeguards in a place where they can see them and understand them. It should be part of their staff training. This is a particularly important one because a lot of times if there is a problem in an aquatic environment, it doesn't come from lifeguards not being able to help someone when they see them. It's that they didn't see them soon enough. And all of this standard kind of goes to were the lifeguards in the right place, or were there any contributing factors in them not seeing a potential victim? So that you will find on the national site. Another thing you can do, and this is more for the Ontario right now, I know, which is you could ask the society to look at the standards to make sure that you are following them, and it also gives you a third-party view of the standards. So it's not just yourself as an operator looking at your standards, but it's also a third-party review. And that's all I've got. So I think we'll open it up to questions. Nicola?
Thank you. Thank you both, Sean. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to share my screen here quickly. All right. We see in my question slide here. Thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways thumbs. All right. Love it. So I've done this and now I can't see my chat box. So I do have one question that came through. Shelley asks, how are updates communicated, or sorry, standards, updates to standards communicated over to affiliates?
I think I can take a shot at this. From a national perspective, standards are communicated to the branches. And then the branches, it would be their job to send it out to the affiliates. But since all the branches are intimately involved in the process, they know and vote on it right up front. I would assume that each province would get the information out to their affiliates, either on the website or through other means of communication. Sean, is that correct from an Ontario perspective?
Yeah, Brian, that makes sense for sure. I know in Ontario, we publish Ontario standards on the website, but well, first off, from national standards during the implementation process, there's that stakeholder review where standards are circulated to key affiliates for comment. So there's that back and forth communication there. But once things are published, often communications will use either an e-blast or through the Lifeliner magazine to promote changes and their relevance for operators. You may see an article in the Lifeliner magazine that points to an update that encourages people to review it. And of course, the other thing is that the society delivers a lot of education through its management training courses, the pool operator course, the aquatic supervisor and aquatic manager courses. So often those courses are opportunities to promote the society standards to participants and help them increase their knowledge as they go about operating their facilities.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, the questions are flowing in. We have from Juanita. When the positions are posted on the national organization, can they be linked to the Ontario website? Is that a possibility of a maybe mutual relationship that's able to happen?
I think that's a great idea.
That should be able to happen. That's something we can look at from a technical standpoint. I think that would be more from a staffing to staffing perspective to get that information out, but it makes sense.
I can echo this because I always have a hard time finding the national website, and it's always Ontario that pops up for me. Okay, from Medi. So may I check any new standard under review regarding using technology for drowning detection pools, like camera-based or wearable solutions, as an aid to lifeguards? So I don't know if this speaks to reviewing standards that are under review, or are they still made available even during that review process?
I can start and say that the Lifesaving Society Ontario is very interested in the use of technology and how that relates to preventing drowning as an assist for lifeguards and operators. The society held a technological symposium last year to help bring industry experts together and highlight the importance of this topic. And the society is currently recruiting and I'm not sure the exact title, but a volunteer chair position to work on this particular area on the safety standards team. So this is an area of interest. It's something that's being worked on. I'm not sure if from a local perspective, we are at that stage where we're reviewing standards at that point, but more to come on that as the new chair comes on board and work gets underway in that portfolio.
Amazing. And I believe we have some attendees just replying back to this. So Marilyn's making mention she's looking at Wave. I'm not sure if that's a program or a piece of tech as an extra resource into this when it comes to implementing technology to pools. Any more questions? I want to keep the ball rolling if we can. I know I have some questions of my own, but prioritize those attending. Type them in. I guess while people are still typing theirs, I had a question regarding the implementation of standards and whether or not they carry any merit when it comes to an emergency or, knock on wood, an inquest when it gets to that point. And if having standards implemented above, of course, their minimums or the provincial or federal legislation, more provincial, does it help in any case? Does it?
Yeah, I think, Nico, it's a really good question. I think all operators want to do their due diligence and they want to create a safe environment for their participants. Obviously, there's a balancing act between investing in resources and ensuring you have sustainable financed operation and getting the necessary funding to do so. So it's a challenge for operators. But implementing the Lifesaving Society standards, meeting that community standard, will demonstrate due diligence that you as an operator are investing in safety. Think of it like a Swiss cheese method, or that we have different layers of protection in place. So it's always best practice to implement the society's standards. And remember that in many cases, the society standard is a minimum standard, that there's opportunities for operators to use that minimum standard as a foundation to develop rigorous policies and procedures to ensure safe aquatic operation. Will it reduce the operator's liability? That's more of a legal question that I can't comment on, but I definitely think that by implementing the society standards, you demonstrate due diligence and show that you're a prudent and reasonable operator that's just trying to prevent drowning and create a safe aquatic operation.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you for that. Makes a lot of sense. And another question I have that just came up myself, is there, and it might be too technical to answer, but is there any copyright, like any copyright difficulties or usage restrictions when it comes to these standards? Can they be copied into, a city or a facility's policy and procedure verbatim, or do they have to be tweaked in a certain level? I'm not sure who would be best to comment on that.
I'll say that the society standards are published, so they are the work product, the copyright of the Lifesaving Society. It would always be best practice to reference the society standards when implementing them into policies and procedures. But the purpose of the society standards is to provide a position statement, a resource for operators, and we would encourage operators to take the information, the rationale, and use that to craft their own policies and procedures. But of course, we would always recommend that people reference the society standards like you would another resource that you're using in your workplace.
Understood.
And from a national perspective, we want to get the standards out. So, using the society standard is exactly what we want to see. So we don't want to hide it behind a paywall or something strange like that. We want it, as many people, as many operators to understand and know what the standards are, and understand what the new standards are when they're published.
And to Brian's point, provincially, that's why there's been a move or a shift from, instead of having standards in a journal that you have to purchase, to ensuring they're, as Brian has said, readily available on the website for everyone to review.
I don't know. That was one of my questions as well. I was curious if those journals would ever get republished or if it's becoming a little bit more of a relic and everything's digitizing. Awesome. I'm not seeing any more questions. I do have one more. I don't want to keep everyone, but as I'm listening to this presentation, of course, I've taken a look at your slides, but more questions came to mind. I'm an operator. Am I able to be selective in which standards I wish to implement? If, for example, some might not make sense, but am I able to be selective in my choosings of which standard to use in my facility, or use in this facility, not another?
I can use the Ontario Waterfront Safety Standards as an example that may answer your question, Nico. The Waterfront Safety Standards outline 4 different scenarios in which waterfront may be supervised, everything from unsupervised to staffed to patrolled to lifeguarded, and provides guidance on the type of equipment and the setup for each of those scenarios. So the intent here is really to give people tools and to say, you know, in your environment, it might make sense to do X, or it might make sense to do Y, and what's the best practice for that environment.
Mhm.
I think that operators will always have to choose, will always have to make a decision to adopt a standard, or to say, you know, this doesn't work in our environment, but here's an alternative. And that's why operators are responsible for their own policies, procedures, and practices, the means and measures, if you will. But what the society is saying, similar to what you might see on the program side, right? These are the must-sees. These are the expected level to ensure a safe environment. And then you have to figure out how to apply those in your setting to meet the particular environment in which you are.
Noted. We have another question that came in. So if a member of the public or an affiliate has a suggestion for a standard that they'd like to see commented on or published, where would they be able to submit that input to?
Generally, they submit it to their branch. So this, you know, like if someone was from Ontario, they'd submit it to the Ontario branch. It would have to, like, to become a standard, though, it still needs to be peer reviewed. There needs to be um, some research on it, that type of thing. If it's a specific question to their facility or something like that, that could be something as simple as getting a topical audit of some sort. But if it's more of a larger question, then that would be, you know, like for a standard, that would go to the branch, and then it would kind of move through that 13-step process that we've outlined.
Awesome.
Yeah, Nico, I just put in the chat Michael Sheen's contacts. So Michael, of course, is our safety management director at the Ontario level, and he could be a good place to send that question and query, and he could filter it to the appropriate group for review. If we have time, Nico, I'd be happy to maybe just quickly look at the Ontario website and show people where to find some of those resources.
We do. I'd love nothing more. Would you like me to stop my share and you'll take over?
Yes, I can do that.
Perfect. There you go.
So Brian was just touching on some of the resources that are available, and I just wanted to make sure everyone knows where to find those. So if you go to lifesavingsociety.com and you go to the safety management tab, there's a lot of resources on here. Safety standards is listed here. And so our published and publicly available standards are here. So I talked about within call earlier. We can find that right here on the webpage. The other thing is we also have legal precedents posted, and, you know, some resources here from various inquests. We also have information about safety audits. So the Society recommends that all aquatic facilities undergo a comprehensive aquatic safety audit, at least every 5 years. But we also provide other services. So you could do a topical audit that looks at a very specific topic that the operator is interested in, and that might be lifeguard scanning and positioning charts. Or you could do an architectural audit where you're building a facility and you want an auditor to help you craft a facility that's safe and has considered lifeguard scanning in its design. We also have information on here on provincial health regulations, and the Society provides consulting services. And there's various resources on here for, including this one, for operators. We also have the management training tab that talks about our courses that provides more information and tools for operators to safely operate their facilities. So I'd encourage everyone on the call to review the Lifesaving Society's website, to review the resources, and then to reach out if you have any questions. And I'll also point to, as Brian was saying, the national website, lifesaving.ca, under the safety management tab, and then those various standards that Brian was going through earlier are listed, including those that are currently under review.
Amazing, thank you. And I will take over once more real quick here. Any more questions that audience may have? Going once, going twice, going thrice. I'm seeing none. So just one little comment here about our upcoming webinar for winter. We are still working on a date. However, I figured winter webinar, less sunlight out there, we can speak to an assessment that was recently completed on the indoor lighting levels of our facilities. And I've actually, the speaker is a former professor of mine, which I'm very happy that he was able to commit his time to join us. The registration details will likely be coming out soon. And if you were paying attention when Sean had taken over the screen just a little while ago, under the safety management tab and resources, that's where you'll find, again, this webinar, today's, as well as all future webinars that we have scheduled, and the registration link there. I'm seeing the comment area. Oh, thank you. Perfect. I appreciate that, Merrick. Thank you. But I just want to extend a big thank you to both Sean and Brian. If we want to give them a virtual applause using the react button on the bottom, that'd be awesome. And to everyone behind the scenes who have admitted people as they've been coming in and out and monitoring it. We have a lot of links here. Thank you. And I think that's all for us today. Feel free to get some of your time back and enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.